Harris is the Garda Commissioner. He was appointed in September 2018 by Fine Gael's Charlie Flanagan. He is the first Garda Commissioner from outside of the Guards in the history of the force. Before taking the role as Garda Commissioner in the south of Ireland, he was the Deputy Chief Constable in the north of Ireland, the PSNI. His father was an RUC officer who was murdered by the IRA in 1989. In his role as Deputy Chief Constable with the PSNI, he had responsibility over intelligence and safety. He has direct links with MI5, and he oversaw investigations into legacy historical cases, including British state collusion. Both PSNI and RUC legacy units were tightly integrated into British intelligence. Harris was appointed by the Fine Gael-led government, who framed this as a modernising move in the face of Garda management scandal. But it was met at the time with some pretty hefty objections, most notably his past allegiance to British intelligence. To this day, Drew Harris retains official secrets obligations in the UK, and he did not do Garda training or Irish legal training before this appointment. This puts an overlap between our Garda Commissioner, the PSNI, and MI5. Apart from the deeply concerning conflicts of interest, the fear here is ideological. Drew Harris is indoctrinated into a British style of policing, a militarised style of policing, and he may push the Irish state towards surveillance under the pretense of modernisation. Already under Harris, the state has expanded riot squads, invested in heavier protection gear, been trained on rapid response crowd techniques that are identical to PSNI drills. The PSNI have already been exposed for unlawful surveillance. And with cross-border intelligence flows between Dublin, Belfast and London becoming more normal, even the Times of London has raised fears about similar methods being deployed in the south. Dublin now relies on officers trained in a force whose own watchdog found systemic collusion, and whose senior rank officials have historically overlapped with secret society and British Empire fraternity networks. The UK Official Secrets Act is still enforceable against Drew Harris, and the Irish law has no mechanism to override that. There's just a huge lack of transparency here. Neither Garda vetting nor Irish oversight bodies can compel disclosure of any Freemason or MI5 links. So, decision-making on Irish intelligence, public order and surveillance is now led by a cohort whose formative culture was in British counterinsurgency. Drew Harris does not need to be overtly corrupt for this to matter. The concern here is his indoctrination, the ideology. This is a man who spent 30 years in the PSNI, at a senior level, in charge of intelligence, linked to MI5. He was trained to manage dissent. He still carries the mindset of British state security and secrecy. He's probably a control freak. I don't know him personally, but certainly obsessed with control of the population, surveillance, and preemption of crime. So no matter whether he's green or orange, his loyalty is to state power. This is the mindset of the colonial administrator. What the appointment tells us about Dublin is that they wanted a hardline enforcer. The Morris Tribunal and whistleblower scandals embarrassed the Gardaí, and the political class, especially Fine Gael, put somebody into the role that would protect institutional power. For obvious historical reasons, he is not trusted by a single person outside of the Pale. But for Dublin and Belfast elites, he guarantees cross-border security cooperation, especially on any dissident Republicans, political activists, people who are against state power. The MI5 trusts this man. The PSNI trusts this man. That gives Dublin access to British intelligence at a huge price. Since 1998, all three of these governments built a shared framework to protect the peace deal, but it was also to contain republicanism, suppressing radicalized organizing and managing any public unrest. The southern state fears unrest right now. Housing protests, border tensions, and anti-establishment sentiment, while Britain fears exposure of its empire-structured collusion networks. And Northern Unionist elites fear loss of dominance, relevance. So it's perfect. He's perfect for all three of them. A loyal, tight-lipped firewall, not between Ireland and the British Empire, but between the elite empire and everybody else. Harris's appointment to the Gardaí needs to be seen as a serious shift in the Irish state identity. We're moving away from our independence towards quiet reintegration into the British security logic. Harris is a loyal node in a much, much older system. He is there to serve and protect British and Irish elite network coordination and security. Appointing a hardliner like Drew Harris suggests that the Irish government is preparing for domestic instability. In 2018, there were a lot of stories in the Irish media about Garda corruption. But rather than reform the Gardaí towards accountability and rights and community policing, they have chosen to harden the institution from the top down. Meanwhile, the inefficiency and corruption that was so embarrassing to the force was not really resolved. It just fell off the news cycle. Manufacturing consent is a term coined by Noam Chomsky. It's when a real crisis, like Garda misconduct, is used to justify a drastic action by the state or the eroding of your rights. This scandal justified a shift with the Gardaí into intelligence policing, surveillance, and deeper cross-border alignment with the UK PSNI. The public was told this force is broken, and only an outsider can fix it. This pre-cleared the runway for Drew Harris, who had no background or training in the Irish force or culture, but had exactly what the state needed: hardline command experience, MI5 access and clearance, and expertise in controlling dissent. After this corruption broke, Ireland should have had a public debate about policing. We should have reflected and asked ourselves what kind of policing Ireland needed. Who are the Garda accountable to? Should they have surveillance or riot capabilities at all? Do we want MI5 security logic dictating our policing policies in a sovereign republic? But instead of facilitating that dialogue, the Irish media spent months talking about fake penalty points, while Disclosure Tribunal disclosed that the Gardaí were deeply dysfunctional and they were too secretive. That's what Tribunal said. The Irish state's response is to hire Drew Harris to make it more secretive. This appointment ultimately just tells us that the Gardaí serve the elite. Since his appointment, Drew Harris has taken €12 million out of the Exchequer for riot gear, $21.5 million for air support militarisation, $218.5 million for fleet specialist kit capital. These are armed response vehicles. Specialist vans, bulletproof vans, protective kits, firearm ranges. A conservative running total is at least $252 million of taxpayer money gone directly on the militarisation of the Gardaí. He's bought riot control gear, armed response vehicles, aircraft, specialist equipment. Overtime for public order deployments is another 150 on top. 150 million. Sorry, how much do the guards get in a base salary? Let's just remind ourselves. €35,000. The guards themselves don't even get a living wage in this country. But Harris has already spent over 250 million of your money preparing to militarise to deploy the police against you. This is not a Northern Ireland versus Southern Ireland or British versus Republic issue. This is top versus bottom, up versus down, the haves versus the have-nots. This is class warfare. Drew Harris is the Garda Commissioner. He was appointed